Welcome back to BNG Hockey, where it's always black and gold. It's that time of year again, the playoffs are here, and the red-hot Boston Bruins look like they're ready to take another run at Lord Stanley's Cup. In this video, I'm going to go over what I think the biggest factors in this series will be, as well as my predictions. Let's talk about it. One of the biggest factors in this series has already been talked about quite a bit. You know him, you hate him. It's Tom Wilson. This is a legit top six forward. He can score some goals, make plays, gets to the front of the net, and has a good amount of skating ability for a bigger guy. But a lot of people forget that he can actually play hockey because of all of his shenanigans. This is a guy who can get suspended at any time, and that's a good thing for the Bruins. You want him out of the series. He plays really physical and has been known to take guys out. So the good thing is he could get suspended and you don't have to worry about him. The bad thing is, at what cost does that suspension come? He could take out one of our best guys. He could take out one of our depth guys. But you never want to see anyone go down, especially around playoff time. So that's something the Bruins have to genuinely be worried about. Not only Tom Wilson, the hockey player who puts numbers on the board and helps his team win, but Tom Wilson, the goon who's looking to take out other guys. We already saw it with Brandon Carlo. That was a bad hit, and we lost an important player for a long time. You don't want that in playoffs. The good thing is, the Bruins do have some guys who can compete with Wilson. One of those guys is Trent Frederic. It is hilarious that Tom Wilson hates Trent Frederic. Trent Frederic is an absolute pest, and there's a lot of guys who don't like Frederic. He gets in your face, he's always looking for a fight, he's not really that good, he's more of a bottom six bum. I do think he has some upside, but if you're a guy like a Tom Wilson or a Chris Letang, you're looking at this kid saying, who even are you, leave me alone. And that really works for Trent Frederic. He's fine playing that role, and the Bruins are fine having him play that role. But Wilson went up to Frederic the other night in a meaningless end of the regular season game and went after Frederic. Frederic wasn't looking for Wilson. Sure, they were probably chirping each other, but Wilson was focused on taking out Frederic instead of playing the game. Now, as I said, that game didn't mean anything, but if you can throw in Trent Frederic and get Wilson away from playing regular hockey and not thinking about injuring our superstars and just focusing on Trent Frederic, that would be a good thing. And who knows, maybe they get into a fight, Wilson does something stupid, and he's kicked out of the series. The NHL really has to pay attention to this guy. They kind of blew it with the Panarin situation, so he is very much on thin ice, and the world will be watching because it's playoff time. And the Bruins have some other big guys too. They have Kevin Miller. They can throw in a Jared Tenorti who took care of Tom Wilson this season. They have options. Guys like Lozon. They're overall a pretty big team. I do realize how big the Capitals are, and that's talked about quite a bit. But don't be too worried, because the Bruins have some tough guys of their own. That leads me to my next factor, the physicality of this series. I will admit, I did want to avoid playing the Capitals. Not because I'm afraid of them, and not because I don't think the Bruins can win in a series against them, but I do realize how physical this series is going to be, and I think that's going to take a toll on both teams, even if you win moving forward. Now, the good thing is we do play them early, so most of our roster is at 100%. But the bad thing is we have to deal with waves and waves of physicality. Tom Wilson is not the only guy we have to worry about. There's guys like Garnet Hathaway, Nick Dowd, Brendan Dillon, even Zdeno Chara, and some of the Capitals superstars are bigger guys who throw their weight around as well. Alex Ovechkin, Anthony Mantha, TJ Oshie. So that's a lot of guys you have to worry about, and they're playing fast and hard. But the Bruins have some of those guys as well. The Bruins superstars. Brad Marchand doesn't mind throwing some hits, playing on the edge. McAvoy throws some huge hits. You have bigger guys like Carlo, all the guys I just mentioned, like Miller, Lozon, Tenorti if he comes into the lineup, Frederic if he comes into the lineup. Our bottom six guys, Wagner's there. Lazar plays with a lot of energy and physicality. So the Bruins have just as many guys, but I am really worried that this is going to be a bloodbath, and even if you come out of this series as the winner, you could be pretty banged up moving on to the next series. But that's part of hockey, and that's what's going to make it a fun series to watch. I would think it would be smart, though, for either team to try and win this series as early as possible. You would want to do that normally, but try and avoid injuries and try and avoid the toll of playing so many physical games. So now that we know it's going to be a physical series, and that's likely going to add up on players over time, let's move into our next factor, injuries. Now, I said it before that the Bruins roster is pretty close to 100%. Unfortunately, Kasha went down again, but we do have guys like Charlie Coyle coming back from an injury. You never really know if guys are playing through things. That does happen at this time of year. But all in all, the roster is looking pretty healthy. So knock on wood, they're ready to go, and they're coming into it as ready as they'll ever be. The Washington Capitals, on the other hand, are not so lucky. Some of their guys are on COVID protocol, including Evgeny Kuznetsov and Ilya Samsonov, so that's one of their top goaltenders and one of their top forwards, who they have really no idea on when they're coming back. You would think it would be sooner rather than later. They've been on the list for about 10 days now, I believe, but some of their top guys are also coming off injury problems. Vitek Vanacek, their other goaltender, was having some injury problems. John Carlson just came back from an injury. Ovechkin just came back from an injury. Backstrom had some injury problems. And TJ Oshie is still out there in a non-contact jersey. So these are all good things for the Bruins. You never want to see anyone get hurt. But at playoff time, if you have these guys out of the lineup, that helps your team win the game. Obviously, those are superstar players, and the Capitals will want to have them, and they're a better team when they're in the lineup. So that's going to be a factor. If you can go after some of these guys and play that hard style of hockey, and they already are dealing with some injury problems, that likely means that they will get to a point where they can't handle the physicality a lot sooner than some of the Bruins guys. So that's going to be a big factor. Injuries can happen at any time. Like I said, you never wish that on anyone on either side, but that will definitely be a factor at some point in this series. Somebody will go out with something, and that will change the series in a big way. Something that always seems to change a series in a big way is goaltending, and that's going to be our next factor. As I mentioned before, Samsonov is on COVID protocol, and this is not the first time he's been on COVID protocol, so that's definitely a storyline to keep an eye on. Tough to say if he would have been the starter. The Capitals are kind of being quiet on what their starting goalie situation will be, and they've been switching between him and Vitek Vanacek all season long. It does look like Vanacek will be ready to go here and be likely the starter, and if neither of them are ready to go, they do have Craig Anderson. Yes, Ottawa Senators Craig Anderson. I'm sure I just surprised some of you because I was surprised. I don't even remember them getting him, but he's not really too much to be worried about. He's nothing more than a third-string guy. He's getting older now, so you definitely have to give goaltending depth over to the Boston Bruins. They have Tuukka Rask. He's one of the most elite goaltenders in the league. He gets hot just like everybody else, and he has some bad games just like everybody else. And they do have an option to go to if Rask has a bad game or two. Jeremy Swayman was confirmed as the backup, and he absolutely deserves it. The kid has been lights out, red hot. We've seen it plenty of times where a goaltender comes out of nowhere and wins a Stanley Cup. Not saying that Jeremy Swayman would be able to do that, but I would love to see it, and I wouldn't be surprised because he's played fantastic this season. So hopefully that motivates Rask. Rask has had some really good stretches in the playoffs. He's never been able to finish the job, but you still have to live or die by Rask. And if it's not working out, for the first time ever, we do have an exciting potential starting goalie in the wings in Jeremy Swayman. And if you lose one of those guys, God forbid that, you do have Yaroslav Halak and even Dan Vladar, for that matter, waiting in the wings, who both had pretty good seasons themselves. So the goaltending is always a factor in any series, and right now with the way it's looking, you have to give that advantage to the Bruins. Another advantage I'll give to the Bruins, and our final factor in this series, is their trade deadline additions. Now, I shouldn't have to remind Bruins fans of the Taylor Hall trade and how well that's worked out with Curtis Lazar, as well as the addition of Mike Riley. The Washington Capitals did something very similar. They sent a large package over to the Detroit Red Wings for power forward Anthony Mantha. He's a guy who uses his size and scores some goals, and is another addition on their already lethal power play. They also got a depth forward in Michael Raffl from the Philadelphia Flyers. He's a guy who can chip in some goals from time to time. We saw him score that crazy goal off the back of Jeremy Swayman's head in the regular season finale. So they did something very similar to the Bruins, where they added someone in their top six so they can bump some other players down, and they also added more depth to their bottom six. I think the Bruins' overall depth is a lot better. I love that we have a guy like Nick Ritchie, who's one of our best goal scorers, as funny as that sounds, playing in the bottom six. You have a guy like Jake DeBrusk down there on the fourth line, technically. Depending on how you look at it, it could be the third line. But the point is, you have a couple of guys who can chip in some goals, and they're playing in your bottom six, and they aren't even your superstars. And that's how you win series. It's always a guy on the third line who scores the biggest goal, and you never saw it coming. Add that to the Bruins' best line in all of hockey with Bergeron, Marchand, and Pastrnak, and the Bruins' best line since the trade deadline of Krejci, Craig Smith, and Taylor Hall, and you got yourself a team. Now, the Washington Capitals have just as much talent on their side, and with the addition to Mantha, they have some guys moving down to their bottom six. But overall, their bottom six doesn't scare me as much as the Bruins, and neither does their defense. Mike Riley has been a fantastic fit. I really like him playing with Carlo. That also moves Lozon down. He's probably more of a third pair guy. And overall, the Capitals defense, even though it has size, it's kind of slow, and that's something that I think the Bruins can take advantage of. And if they have an injury on that back end, like John Carlson goes down with his injury once again, or even a guy like Orlov, suddenly that defensive core looks a lot less scary. So I think the Bruins' overall depth and speed throughout their lineup is going to help them a lot in this series. And that's due to the great work by Don Sweeney at this year's trade deadline. Now for the moment we've all been waiting for, my prediction. I'll be taking the Boston Bruins to win this series in 6 games. I wouldn't be surprised if this series goes to 7 games. I'm taking the Bruins in 6. It shouldn't be too much of a surprise that I'm picking the Bruins, but I'm not just picking them because they're my team. I genuinely do believe we can win this series. It's definitely going to be tough. I could see it going to a Game 7. There's going to be a lot of speed. There's superstars on both sides. It's going to be one of the best series in the first round by far. But I do think the Bruins will come out on top. Overall, I think they have the talent. Overall, I think the speed will win out, and I think we can match up with the Capitals' physicality. So I'm taking the Bruins in 6, and I'd love to know your predictions. So leave that down below in the comments. What do you think of this series? What do you think the biggest factors are? And your prediction on who will win the series and in how many games. If you enjoyed this video and you're pumped for the playoffs, make sure to give this video a big like, and if you haven't already, subscribe.